It's now my pleasure to introduce Lynn Holmes Howe. She and I met at a Guild How to Freelance meeting, and I learned of her story, and I was very impressed by it. And as I got to know her better, I realized she had great experiences that a lot of people would benefit from hearing. And so she graciously agreed to have this session and talk about her experience as a manager, laying off and being laid off. I am grateful for her willingness to present and have really enjoyed working with her. She is a warm and caring person, which is why this subject is so near and dear to her heart. And it's just been a pleasure preparing with her. So I'd like to turn the time over to you, Lynn.
All right, thank you. So just a sound check. Again, can everybody hear me all right? Sounds good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ray, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon, if it's morning where you are, or possibly evening, depending on your location. I hope we can have an insightful discussion about this very top of mind topic, especially over what's happened in the past week, 2 weeks. Feel free to stop me, add your own experiences, ask questions, etc. This is one topic that, like so many others in our day-to-day lives, really does take a village. And before I start, I also want to acknowledge that this can be an emotional and sensitive subject, especially if you or someone in your life have been directly impacted as I have. And so I hope this presentation doesn't cause undue stress that anyone's experiencing these days, and instead just really reinforces that this is a community that's deeply empathetic, deeply caring, and we are here to help each other. All right. And I knew this would happen. Okay, here we go. Somehow my keyboard's not working right today. Anyway, so today I'll be sharing a bit of my background, where the employment market sits these days. I think we're probably somewhat aware of that. How we as leaders and managers can lay off staff with empathy if we need to, and how we can prepare for and survive getting laid off. All right, so first, a little bit about me. So I have lived in a small harbor town in Monmouth County, New Jersey for over 30 years. My husband, Bob, is a landscape architect. We have 2 grown kids, so they've been along on my work journey for many, many years. And I live where I do because I love the beach. I also really like hiking. We've got great county parks and state parks in New Jersey. If you haven't been to visit, you should. And lately I've been tackling some small parts of the Appalachian Trail this year. I graduated from Rutgers with a bachelor's in psychology. I minored in communications. And when I got out of school, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I had an idea what I didn't want to do. I didn't really want to go into counseling. I had worked with autistic children, and I knew that I didn't have the skill set that I really wanted to have. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I feel really lucky that I got a job at Bell Labs and ultimately ended up in a human factors role, which is kind of the predecessor to user experience and user experience research. And that motivated me to stop my part-time kind of stop MBA work I'd been doing and switched instead to earn a master's in applied psychology, human factors engineering from Stevens Tech. And then as I continued my career at AT&T, eventually I was a lead, then a manager. And as we became a digital first company, our team supported the buy flow and account management user experiences for TV and wireless at AT&T.
Hey, Lynn, can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Your slides aren't showing. So
Pardon?
Your slides aren't showing. So
oh my gosh.
Share that screen again.
All right.
Good with us.
I'm not sure why that would be, but hang on. Sorry, I didn't notice your hand either, so.
No worries.
Huh. Okay. All right.
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Beautiful.
Okay. All right. Now you heard me say lots of words. Now you can see all the print for it. Anyway, So beginning around 2016 at AT&T, regular downsizing across the company occurred. Happened about every 6 months, but our organization, which was research, UX designers, content writers, and strategists, generally we were always somewhat protected and not impacted, but many people we worked with were. But in September 2020, a little over 2 years ago, our organization was hit and they made up for it. We had about 40% of the organization cut, and it impacted every level. And although about a week before the surplus action was announced, I was told I was not impacted, I was. And boy, was I unprepared. I wasn't ready to stop working. So here I was, job hunting after 37 years. I immediately jumped into the interview process. I interviewed with 3 companies within the first several weeks. One former colleague referred me to Facebook, another to Truist Bank. And then one interview came through a recruiter who reached out to me on LinkedIn for a beauty startup that I wasn't familiar with called Glossier. So after 7 interviews, interview had changed a lot since I started interviewing 37 years earlier. I was offered the role with Glossier. And then again, I felt incredibly lucky to land a dream UX research job. A cool brand, a wonderful work culture, really fun, smart, passionate coworkers, a lot younger. I'll also put that out there. CEO is 34. And just some really interesting research topics after spending many years in telecom. Now, after a huge downsizing in January that sparked really significant attrition continuing over the next several months with nearly weekly organization announcements of who was leaving, it definitely became a very stressful work environment. We were all stretched really thin. Those who had remained behind, it was over probably about 60% of the company had been laid off, and there was only 300 to start. I worked harder than I probably ever had. I was putting in long days and weekends to get the needed research done. But we were repeatedly assured that no additional layoffs were planned. So I didn't think anything of it when an org announcement landed in my inbox one morning, about an hour before our August town hall. And then other than, geez, who's leaving now? I hope it's not, so-and-so. But it turns out it was me, along with several dozen others. And we were all completely blindsided. There had been no indication that this was coming. And so barely 11 minutes after receiving that email, which was really long, and it was buried in like the second and third paragraph that this was happening, I found myself on a call and my role had been eliminated and my employment was ending. So all of the information and tips I'll be sharing today with you came about from my very direct experiences, as well as some additional resources, which I have listed in the appendix. So to get started here, oops, going backwards now. So let's start by taking a look at this employment landscape over the past few years, kind of see how we got to where we are. So American layoffs and firings are at a 20-year low. This is the title of an article that was published by Vox on April 9th, 2019. You can see the big peak of layoffs during that 2000-2009 recession, and then that nice steady decline mostly afterwards. But then COVID arrived in March of 2020, and layoffs, as we all know, exploded during the pandemic, during which an estimated 57 million employees lost their jobs, including some of these well-known companies, most of which were most likely directly impacted by the shelter in place and the travel restrictions. And these ones are among those that had the largest number of layoffs, in some cases, tens of thousands of employees. But along with the pandemic came a boon, right, in tech. Digital UX is exploding, new brands helping people adapt to the new paradigms of remote work, apps launched left and right to meet digital needs, supporting, being more on the new in-home lifestyle and basically getting through that pandemic. Which brings us to today, literally, an uncertain economic environment. For the last several months, no doubt all of us have seen a steady stream of LinkedIn pages filled with layoff stories and plenty reported in the press as well. Last month, Zillow, Peloton, Wayfair, all of whom saw huge increases in business during the height of the pandemic, were among the layoffs announced in October. And as we all know, just this month alone, barely midway into November, more than a dozen companies have laid off employees, including nearly 50% of Twitter's workforce, 13% of Meta's. Lyft's had their second one this year, 650 people. Stripe, a little over 1,000. And of course, everyone probably saw the news this week that Amazon announced potentially up to 10,000 jobs would be cut. And I believe those started happening yesterday. Now, also reported in the press and shared widely across social media was how these companies and others conducted their layoffs. Many with pretty shocking or unbelievable layoff stories. And I guess when I read them, I think about things, maybe the term, scorched earth comes to mind. So let's take a look quickly at some of the companies that got it really, really wrong. Many have no doubt seen the cringe video that an employee recorded where Better.com CEO Vishal Garg announced to them that just before the holidays and last December, if you're on this call, you're part of the unlucky group being laid off. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. And although acknowledging that he should have done better in a second, again, poorly handled round just a few months later, impacted employees learned they were getting laid off by finding several severance deposits that were deposited in their bank accounts prematurely. Bird, an e-scooter startup, had employees log into a Zoom call. When they logged in, the screen just showed one slide that said COVID-19 update. And then they heard a disembodied voice read from a script that they were being laid off. And then the call ended. Now, Snap's messy mass layoff resulted in some employees who were unable to join the calls to hear that they were getting laid off, or others that were getting kicked off calls before they were finished being told what was happening, with computers being completely wiped. And then there's Twitter, which has been called the poster child of how not to lay off employees. I mean, we've seen it all, right? The press, social media, filled with stories of how that went down and how it continues to go down. But I think it's worth mentioning here, one thing that came about with the Twitter layoffs that has been that the impacted employees have been tweeting about their experience, the roles they played while they were at Twitter, really telling their story and coming together as a community and effectively taking away what in the past might have felt really like a stigma or feeling shame or being embarrassed. They really owned their own narrative and kind of opened up the landscape for everyone to be like, hey, yeah, this has happened and it's happened to us too. And I'll share what happened with AT&T 2 years ago. I happened to be on PTO and my phone started blowing up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a colleague group texting us. It was about a group of 12 at that point, asking if anyone else got an off payroll email. So what happened was HR had prematurely released an email, and I can remember the subject. It was steps to take before going off payroll, before we were ever informed that we were getting laid off. They had gotten the timing wrong. Confusion, of course, reigned. A silence from our leadership, no doubt scrambling to cover their rears. And it took over an hour for the one-on-one calls to start being made so that we really realized, yep, it really was happening. This wasn't a mistake. This was not a testing 1, 2, 3. And no apologies were made. So the takeaway here is awful. It is awful to not know it's coming, to not have the opportunity to ask questions, to have only one-way communication, or to find out that you've been laid off when you can't log into your work PC or via a mishandled email. But there are some good examples. So let's move on to one of those, and that's Airbnb. So Airbnb has been called a role model for how to lay off employees with compassion and empathy. Their CEO, Brian Chesky, gathered the team and said, hey, I've got sad news. He told his staff that they were being forced to downsize in light of the company's financial situation. He was really clear with impacted employees that it was not because of anything they'd done wrong, nor was it a reflection on their work or their work ethic. Airbnb provided 14 weeks of pay, plus an additional 1 week for every year the employee had been there. They received health insurance and their costs through COBRA for a full year, pretty unheard of. Impacted employees were also given the option to have their profiles, resumes, and something really important, work samples, available for them. I want to just emphasize that work samples, as if you've been impacted like this, as I have, many severance packages require the employee has to agree that they're not going to copy, they're not going to download their work, making it really difficult to pull together a portfolio. So really kudos to Airbnb for allowing people to walk away with their work samples. The company also reallocated its recruiting team to help the departing employees find jobs. And I know certainly at Glossier, the recruiting team was really heavily hit by both of the layoffs this year. So having a job and helping others find jobs, what a win-win situation there. Departing staff also received 4 months of career services and were able to keep their Apple laptops to help with their job searches. So really well done. So how can employers, leaders, managers handle layoffs to be more like Airbnb and less like the others who got it wrong? Well, first of all, let's acknowledge that laying off employees is the single most difficult thing leaders are asked to do. You're telling someone that he or she is no longer getting a paycheck, and in many cases, including mine at Glossier, that when she or he wakes up the next morning, they have no place to go, they don't have work to do. Beyond the financial impacts, there's also impacts to physical and emotional health. And you can see some of the quotes there on the right. Jonathan Cedarloff of the University of Edinburgh found layoffs can have long-lasting negative health consequences for workers, including increasing their mortality potentially. And Dr. Brenner of Johns Hopkins found that for every 1% increase in the national employment rate, there were statistically nearly 40,000 more deaths, 20,000 more heart failures, a little over 4,000 more mental hospital admissions, and 920 more suicides. All of these resulting in a massive strain on public resources and, of course, on personal lives. So laying someone off, it will never be easy. It's not going to be painless, but you can still be empathetic, kind, supportive, and help make a difficult transition easier. So before we get into that, before we can dig in what we as leaders can do, I'd love to get a quick pulse on the experiences of people on this call. Have you had to lay off staff? And while that's being tabulated, I just checked to see if there's any questions in the chat.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Wow, we have surprising results. Here you go.
All right.
I'll share them now.
All right, so about a third of us have had to go through it, and 2/3 haven't. All right. Well, in case you need to, and then those of us who have gone through it, we can see how did we do. All right. So taking what we've learned both by the bad examples, the good examples, our own personal experiences, here are 6 steps to help conduct layoffs with empathy and compassion. So first, don't let layoffs come as a surprise. We were absolutely blindsided at Glossier. And I think that also really played into when we had the calls. And again, mine was like 11 minutes after finding this out. I was still trying to process that, first of all, there was going to be a layoff, and second of all, that I was impacted. Don't let them come as a surprise. Leadership should start offering color and context, what's happening, what's going on in the company, and why layoffs might be needed. Be transparent, not only to help the impacted employees understand that why, but also for those who are not impacted and will have an entire set of emotions as well, which I'll also cover in a couple of slides. Second, prepare yourself as the person who's delivering the news as best you can. It's going to be a difficult conversation no matter what. So having a script or having some talking points can help you stay or be as professional as possible under super difficult circumstances. and to be helpful. So anticipate what questions employees will have and have those answers ready, or promise to get them immediately to them afterwards, and make sure you do that. Make sure necessary paperwork is ready, and if it's in person, you're handing it off. If it's virtual, make sure it's sent immediately. I had to ask for mine from Glossier the very next day when nothing had arrived by mail, although I was told it would be there by early afternoon the previous day. And I had to, reach out to people ops and say, hey, where's the info? Now, I also recognize that often a company has a script managers can't deviate from. That was definitely the case at AT&T, really for legal purposes. But in that case, at least you can modulate your tone and delivery to be compassionate. Third, as managers, we need to take the time to speak one-on-one with people who are being let go. Make sure you acknowledge their work, acknowledge their accomplishments, what they brought to the company, and the impact they had to the company. It's something we really want to hear. Trust me on that one. I know from sitting on the other side of the table. Listen to their feedback. Schedule a check-in call. Again, make it optional, but offer to let them reach out to you at any time. It's also important to make sure that you're clear that the decision is final, but you're there to keep talking through things if they need to. Continuing on. So fourth, tell them that you're happy to give recommendations, and do it. If you've got that week or two beforehand that this is coming, make sure get them ready beforehand, have them ready to go. Make sure you offer your direct contact info to them to share with any potential employers. Fifth, offer to help them find another job. Reach out to your network. Provide tools like a resume builder. If your company offers career counseling, just anything to help them, help their feet hit the ground after they've probably left the ground. And six, generous severance packages can go a long way in easing the impact of being laid off. And packages could include things like additional weeks of salary, company stock options, health insurance, accumulated PTO, deposits into their 401 account, and access to internal job portals if that's available. So it's really important to let them know what's happening, what's available, what is the package, what are your options, what happens to stock options if they're available. Give that access to recruiters, career coaches, and connections within your network of contacts. And I'd like to just stop here and just ask, what other things have you done or heard of being done, or possibly been on the receiving end of this that you think would be a good idea to add here, if anybody's got any suggestions. All right, well, maybe for a later discussion.
Lynn, I felt like one of the most important points you made were just the one-on-one, give it two-way communication, creating an opportunity for communication both ways, and to share the accomplishments that you appreciate from the employee. To me, that's such a big part of the humane way to do it.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, so before I wrap up this section, as leaders and managers, it's important to also consider the employees remaining. So I've also been on that side of the fence. So not only in terms of how they see their former colleagues treated, how the layoffs occurred, obviously the more poorly handled, the bigger the impacts to morale, but in how they're feeling about the loss, because it is a loss. They may have survivor guilt. And plus, obviously, there'll be some uncertainty about their future with the company. Leaders need to share and share again plans for the company, what's happening repeatedly, just reassuring those employees things are on track, they're valued and supported as employees, we're getting through this. And research here has also shown that remaining employees can also experience impacts to their physical and mental health. UC at Berkeley study found increased mental health outpatient visits and increased mental health related prescriptions, obviously all impacting productivity. Now, my personal experience here, when I was one who remained, really varied widely between what AT&T handled and how Glossier handled. So at AT&T, and I know I see a former colleague, Heather, is on here, so she can probably testify to this as well. At AT&T, immediately after hearing the news, back to work, stay focused, milestones to meet, deliverables to deliver. And it was just like, now, the flip side of that was Glossier and the January layoffs, which were really shocking because, again, they were blindsided and over 100 people going. It was take the rest of the week. Still processing meetings were on the calendar weekly. It was hard to really move forward for a while. So that was probably a little on the extreme side. So it's kind of that striking a balance between how AT&T handled and how Glossier handled would be optimal. And any additional thoughts to share here?
Heather made a great comment in the chat that a manager, maybe it was, I'm not sure where, but that a manager got the survivors working to help those who'd been laid off, helping with their resumes, helping with their portfolios. Maybe it was portfolios in particular. Yeah, portfolios.
That was not at AT&T, was it?
No. This was post telecom life at a different company. And we, set up external Slack channels and sort of had a train of networking opportunities and portfolio materials, and just really got people who were still there internally involved with helping their former teammates land somewhere else. And in almost every case, it was a good news story. Like that person ended up in a better role than they had at the prior company. So I think it helped the survivors who were retained process and deal with it a lot faster and get productive again. So.
Well, I love that. That's not anything I've heard from among, the populations I've spoken to. That's really,
I don't know
great.
how, legit it was. Like if the top of the company, if they were fully aware of what was happening, would have permitted what was happening, but your mileage may vary.
Yeah. Well, and again, it takes a village. And, I think of all roles, I think in the user experience research, it is such a family oriented and connected group and community. So that was great. Thanks for sharing that, Heather. Anyone else before we move on? All right. Now let's talk about the situation where we're the ones being laid off or worried that we might be laid off, and how we can best prepare ourselves and what can and should we do if it does happen. All right, but first, another poll. All right, Ray.
Okay, the poll is launched. We'll give 10 seconds for people to respond if they've ever been laid off. Wow, it's so fun to see all the results before all you can see them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it unless there's anybody more. All right, now all of you can see the results.
All right, so more than 50%. Well, yeah.
More than 50%, and a third have been laid off twice or more.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, but happy for the 42% who haven't had to experience this, because it's not fun. All right, take that poll. All right, so sharing some ideas here that can help you evaluate how prepared you are in case it happens to you. So as I've already shared, I was woefully unprepared the first time, resulting in heaps more stress than I was already experiencing. So first and foremost, keep your resume current, especially updated after a promotion or if you were acquired a new skill. So should probably be embarrassed to say it, but yeah, I had to start from scratch. My resume was over 30 years old. Oops. Keep your LinkedIn profile current. Mine was pretty scant. I want to say, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, LinkedIn really wasn't I think the platform that it is now, where there's just so much going on out there, and people obviously really using that for job search and for recruiting. So had to spend some time getting that brought up to snuff. And don't go look at it right now. I don't want to know. No. Take time to build out your network, join relevant job groups and professional organizations that you can tap into if needed. And here we all are on this community. Acknowledge recruiters who reach out with related job opportunities. If you're like me, you go kind of through periods. Sometimes I'm getting 10 a day and I'm like, oh, stop. But you know what? It's really good. Make those connections, connect with them. You never know, maybe in the future you'll need them. Gather work samples to build your portfolio. Not my experience for both my companies in which I was laid off was not like Airbnb, and I did have to sign that I wasn't going to download, copy, etc. But I had already, at least in the case of Glossier, I had made copies of some of the more important work that I had worked on, just so I would have it in case I wanted to be able to speak to what I had done. It's easy to forget, which leads me to the next bullet. Keep copies of your performance reviews. These can be really helpful memory joggers for what you did. And if you're like how I was, and I hope you're not, it can really help you create a resume. Take time to really understand your benefits, and especially if you're thinking, if there's maybe some rumbles around that maybe there'll be layoffs, really dig into this and really understand, your health care, how much time off maybe you've accumulated. AT&T, I was paid for my unused vacation. Glossier, I was not, and lost almost 3 weeks. That really hurt. Are there flex spending accounts that you need to use while you're employed? What are the terms if you've got some equity? If you've got, where are you in terms of the timeline for vesting? Just kind of bring yourself up to speed for what you have as part of your compensation package. And make a career plan. Have you been thinking about a pivot? Take some time to investigate. Is there something that you are really interested in? Maybe take a look around. Is it something that's feasible? Are there things maybe you could do now to help you get to that different job? Just, know your next step. And I'll add, if you know or suspect layoffs are coming, or maybe even if not, go ahead and apply for other roles. You have nothing to lose. My experience is right now, interviews can take several months because there's sometimes 4, 5, 6 leaders that you have to meet with. And so starting sooner can be a big benefit. And any other tips anyone else maybe has on the call that can let us know? Something that's maybe missing here, or elaborate a little further on? All right, well, we can save those again for discussion. All right, so it's happened. What's next? First, take a deep breath and do something that brings you stress relief. I went to the beach. I watched the waves come in. I watched the waves go out. I watched them come in while I really let it all wash over me, so to speak. Allow yourself time to grieve. You're going to have a lot of emotions. They're going to swing widely from minute to minute, hour to hour. I guess it's really hard to be prepared for that, but just know that it can happen and just go with it. Reach out or connect with others, maybe other impacted colleagues or a trusted friend or a community like this one, if you think that's something that's going to help you. Again, understand the details of your exit package. What's your severance? Are you getting any health coverage? What's COBRA? Did you have a 401k? Note especially the important dates for when you maybe have to do things so that you don't lose whatever your package includes. Make a list for what you need to update or what you need to spruce up. As you already know, for me, it was resume, LinkedIn. Wanted to make sure I was making all those connections. Reach out to your network. Ask for colleagues to submit recommendations for your LinkedIn page. I learned from an earlier round at AT&T that having those recommendations, many of the people that were had been laid off felt that those recommendations were exactly what got them into their next job. They're really, really important. So take a look at your recommendations. If your recommendations are 5, 10, 15 years old. Get some fresh ones, get some new ones up there. And if your former company has offered free career counseling as part of the exit package, sign up. I was so worried how I'd be after working 37 years. I had 2 5-month maternity leaves. I signed up for everything under the sun, both professional terms of how to write an exit statement, how to spiff up your LinkedIn, how to interview. And then I also signed up for topics that interested me and other job fields that had free webinars. One was an interior design series, just to be sure I had something I had to do each day. I was very worried. It turned out I didn't need to be so worried. I was fine. File for unemployment the first day that you're eligible. Generally, that's the first day that you're no longer on the payroll. So you can't, as soon as you're laid off, if you are actually if you're actually still employed for another couple of days or however they do it, you cannot apply until your actual first day that you're no longer an employee. Be aware that this can be super frustrating if you've never had to do it before, and it can take longer than you think to get through the paperwork. Make a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and sit down to try and get through it. It's also my recommendation to schedule and limit the time you devote to finding your next work opportunity. I can't emphasize this enough. I wore myself out. I totally exhausted myself coming out of the gate so hard, and had multiple come aparts before, like picking myself up and going, you can do this, get going. And if you have the luxury to be able to rest and restore before you charge right into your next job, maybe your severance is giving you, enough weeks that you can maybe take some time to volunteer at a place local that has meaning to you. Maybe you can spend a little more time dedicating your side hustle or start one that you've been meaning to. Catch up on medical appointments that maybe you've put off to avoid missing work time. Commit to a hobby or develop a new one that interests you, or use your free time to take an online course to learn a new skill related to your role or a role that you'd like to have, or just something else for fun. Any other things that people think could be added here from their own experiences? All right. It's a quiet midday group. All right, so I know we're going to have a discussion. Before we do that, I just wanted to let you know, because this deck will be made available, and I do have the resources, something interesting things to look at, and a 7-day guide. And I'll just show you. So if you're like me, you need a little bit of structure and organization the first time it happens. If that kind of helps you get through it, there's a guide for days 1 through 7 in the back of the deck. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing now and turn it to you, back to you, Ray.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Great information that you've shared, both as a manager and as an employee being laid off. I just want to open things up for a minute and see if people don't want to ask some direct questions and do some little bit of follow-up with you. We can do that as a group, and then we're intending to do some breakout rooms, and Lynn will have her own room. So you'll also have a chance to join her room and kind of talk one-on-one. But if there's some questions to handle as a group, we'd love to do those now before we do breakout rooms. You can feel free to just speak or raise a hand. And if we don't have comments now, we'll just move on to breakout rooms and let people, speak in that smaller format if they'd like to.
Can you put the last slide back up? Not the last one, but maybe the next to last one.
All right, let's see.
I'll get the link for the deck, and I'll paste the link
Okay.
as well for anyone.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, actually, I was about to comment, Ralph. So I guess I'm not really, I wasn't aware that it could vary from state to state. I know in New Jersey, getting severance does not impact unemployment. You can go ahead and sign up for unemployment regardless of whether you have severance or not. But it sounds like maybe other states are different.
Yeah, some other states are different. they may, some states will literally take that severance payment, check on it, and decide you're not really unemployed until that severance is used up.
Hmm. Good to know. Unfortunate too.
Yeah. But, you know, and I'll chime in too. I've been, 3 of my last 4 positions ended in layoffs. And so I'll just chime in with Vicky's question there. Yeah, just tell people straight up, there was a layoff. You know, you be very open and upfront about it. Don't be bitter about it. Don't offer commentary. Just say, yep, there was a layoff, and I got caught up in it.
Yeah, I was going to add that. So Vicky, that was, I think the first course I signed up for with the career counseling after AT&T was how to write an exit statement. I didn't even know what that even meant, but I was like, okay, well, I'll just sign up for this because it's tomorrow at 1 o'clock and I can make that. And it really helped me craft, a statement of, we recently had a major reorganization and a number of staff, including myself, were laid off from our jobs. So I mean, it was really helpful to actually have that little exit statement class. So that's, writing that out for yourself and having it, if it's a slip of paper, a Post-it note, just to practice and say, here's what happened. A number of us were let go due to a major reorganization in the company, myself included.
Thank you so much.
Well, awesome. Let's just move to the next step. If you have more questions for Lynn, feel free to join her breakout room. If you'd like to, of course, it's optional, which I guess makes me want to say a thank you to Lynn before we split into the rooms in case everybody doesn't come back. But Lynn, thank you so much. Opening up, sharing your experience, incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable.
You're very welcome. Of course, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can talk about this. And honestly, the Twitter folks, I think, have really made it so that it can be something very openly discussed. And I think that's a really good thing, because the last thing you need is feeling that embarrassment of, why me and how did it happen to me? Why did it happen to me? It shouldn't have happened to me. So yeah, I'm glad we can all have conversations about it.